Okay, so we're back with Tired of the Crud, preaching, teaching. Uh, haven't put up a message in a couple of weeks, so we're gonna be. I was thinking about for a couple of weeks what book I was gonna go into, and so came across Nehemiah, and so here we go. I had just done a book in the New Testament, Jude. So now I want to go back in the Old Testament and do another one. So, as usual with chapter 1 of a new book, I want to give you some background information on it, and then we'll go from there. Can you pause that? Okay. Okay. Although the current books of Ezra and Nehemiah were originally one book, and later came to be known as 1st and 2nd Ezra, Jerome was the first man to call the second portion by the name of Nehemiah. The names of Ezra and Nehemiah were first printed in an English edition in the Geneva Bible in 1560, the year 1560. Nehemiah means Jehovah comforts. Nehemiah was the principal character of the book and probably wrote it. The book recounts the rebuilding of Jerusalem as a fortified city and the establishment of city authority there. Nehemiah was appointed by the Persians to be governor. He came with an army escort at government expense to accomplish God's purpose. The book of Nehemiah is a natural sequel to the book of Ezra. It focuses much attention upon their efforts to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, despite fierce opposition from unfriendly neighbors. The Persian kings were humane rulers, unlike the predecessors, the Assyrians. The Persian Empire, which went from 539 BC to 331 BC, was established upon a more benign policy of returning displaced ethnic groups to their homelands. Nehemiah was a remarkable spiritual leader who could perform in practical ways. He was very sad to learn of the terrible condition of Jerusalem, but he believed that God, working through pagan kings, could bring about full restoration. He trusted God completely and would not be intimidated by anyone. The book of Nehemiah covers about 25 years of history, from 457 BC to 432 BC, and the prophet Malachi was active during this time. So, we know, it doesn't take away from the inspiration or the anointingness of the Bible to know that, first of all, the fact that, in the text it says that the king, the emperor here, agrees to help Israel. The fact that this was a policy of the Persian Empire and it was not a special, unique favor given to Israel that would show that God was keeping his promise. The fact that this is something that the Persians were known to do doesn't have any effect on that at all. In fact, I was very seriously, I was never seriously thinking about omitting this. And I could go through all this. I could have the first message just be on the forward. Okay. I want to do it. Maybe we'll make Nehemiah 1, part 1 and 2. I do want to go into this a little bit here. Have them both be about 15 minutes. First of all, I hear people talk about the Bible being changed. That's part lack of education and part people just down talking the Bible. Now, when I say lack of education, is that an insult? No, it's not. Look, the Bible is one of the least studied books by people who don't apply themselves to it. When you study the Bible, you got to want it. Okay, it's hard work. It is harder work to study the Bible than it is any other book out there because of its age. You got to put in the curls and the deadlifts. And most people either don't have the time or they don't have the motivation to do that. But what kills me is people who don't have that time making statements saying, oh, that's been changed. And that somehow changes the validity of it. I had a guy a long time ago said, the Bible is not inerrant. Do you know how many times that book has been changed? Okay, well, let me ask you a question. I'll ask you a question. Although the current books of Ezra and Nehemiah were originally one book and later came to be known as 1st and 2nd Ezra, Jerome was the first to call the second portion by the name Nehemiah. Okay, so they were originally compiled as the 1st and 2nd Ezra. And it wasn't until, a century, two, doesn't matter how many centuries later it was, that when they decided to split them into two books, that they decided to call the second one Nehemiah. How does that change the text? I'm asking you a question. How does that change the text? Does it say here, when the current books of Nehemiah and Ezra were originally one book, does it say here, oh, and by the way, they went back and rewrote them? So they're different. So the meaning changed. So God's purpose in writing it changed. There was a real big worry about making it in the Bible because there were so many redactions to it, omissions, parts blotted out. Someone went back and completely redid the whole thing. The text was changed in major ways. Does it say that? No, it doesn't. I ask you a question. Okay? Let's say the Led Zeppelin and Rolling Stone bands, rock bands, put out an LP. Right? Because they put those out when those two bands were in their primes. Okay, let's say when they had the album success and 15 years pass and they decide to come up with a compilation album for both bands that include some of the songs digitally remastered, some of them maybe the Jimmy Page decided that he wanted to use a sus chord instead of a regular chord because he liked the sound a little bit better. And they put at the end of that song remix or redub or whatever. Lyrics stayed the same. Music stayed the same. Everything about the song stayed the same except he just simply tried to change chords a little bit. And so because that, they put something in parentheses after the song's name on the record. And some of the songs, a lot of the songs come from one album. And they call it a reprise. They put whatever kind of new language on there to explain that there are modifications. You wouldn't say that changes the song. Does all of a sudden Black Dog sound like Going to California? Going to California is a ballad, acoustic ballad with some mandolin in there. Black Dog's a hard rock song. Would you say that they changed Going to California to Black Dog and back and forth? No, they're the same song. Right? So what does it matter if while the Bible is in the process of being compiled, which happened over centuries, does it matter that the books, that Ezra gets split into two and the second is the name is changed? Maybe they changed the name Nehemiah because that's the main character. You think maybe somebody came along and decided that Ezra and Nehemiah, the stories intertwined, so they were the same book, but somebody decided, but yeah, Ezra kind of leaves the scene in Nehemiah. So maybe we should update it to where we change the name, we split them in two, where it's supposed to be split, where Ezra leaves the scene, to not change anything. Ezra is a clear into Ezra, and a clear place where Ezra leaves the scene, and a clear place where Nehemiah is the main character, starting in chapter 1. And so we decided to change the name to Nehemiah because that's who it's about. How does that change the Bible? How does that change the meaning? You'd say to yourself, well, if they decided to call Ezra 1 and Ezra 2, then you'd be saying, well, you see, there's a mistake because Ezra is gone at the end of Ezra, so why is this second part still called Ezra? The 2, he has nothing to do with it. There's a reason why they changed it, and it makes total sense. Because whoever came up with the original name for both books, Ezra, had a reason at that time to not make the distinction. He had another purpose in mind. He had another goal. He had another thing he was doing. His job was not to make that distinction. His job was something else. There's no reason for him to do that. Somebody else could come along and do that when it was necessary. And you'll say, okay, well, Jerome, who was a philosopher, was the first man to call the second portion by the name of Nehemiah. And that caught on until it came into print. Well, wasn't Jerome just a man? What gives him the authority to do that? Okay, well, let me tell you this. The scribes who were responsible for copying the texts when they started to wither and fade, to preserve them, who were they? If anything, Jerome is more famous than they are. He's a historical figure. I would look at that and say, well, gosh, Jerome was a historical figure. We could put our finger on him, and he called it a book in the Bible by a certain name that made sense. That actually adds to the historical credibility of the Bible. That takes away from it. I'm never afraid of any of this stuff. Anybody who's afraid of explaining this stuff is a pansy. So the names of Ezra and Nehemiah were first printed in an English edition in the Geneva Bible in 1560. Wow! That was 1,560 years. Boy, that's got to be fraudulent. That's got to be fake. How? How is that that's fake? That Nehemiah's name wasn't in the print until 1560. So what? I don't see how that matters for anything. You know, the Bible is an ancient book, and we're always making discoveries to the Bible that causes us to update, not change. Update. And change, update is a change. But how does calling the book Nehemiah in 1560 change the meaning of the book? One jot or tittle. Huh? How? And so you'll say, well, I mean, when it came later to be known as 1st, 2nd Ezra, and then they changed it to Nehemiah, why change it twice? Why not change it twice? Because somewhere later along, somebody decided that Ezra leaves the scene at the middle part of the book, so they decided to divide them into two. Okay, so... and then decided to change to update it again to where they adjust the name of the second book, and it takes 1,000 years for them to do this. So what? What does that matter? Doesn't matter. You know what does matter? Is why do you choose to believe this stuff? Why is the first inclination of somebody's heart to right offhand discredit the scripture? You ever watch a commercial for a product that they're trying to sell? And I just asked this lady the other day, this very same thing. I was asking her about the difference between Fox News and CNN. And right away, out of hand, she tells me that CNN is trustworthy and Fox News isn't. And so I asked her the simple question, well, why do you believe that? I don't care whether you think Fox News or CNN is trustworthy or not. I'm not worried about that. Why do you believe that? Well, why do you ask? Because the way you said it, CNN's trustworthy, Fox News isn't. The way you said that sounds to me like you're taking other people's words for it. Well, that's right. I say, so why do any of us make a decision about the integrity and credibility of a news source because of what other people say, rather than looking into it yourself? You look at an infomercial talking about hair growth or whatever, and they bring on these people who endorse the product because they supposedly use it. You know why I don't necessarily believe those people? I don't know who they are. And how do I know how much money are they paying you to say what you're saying, and you're in there saying it because you're getting money to say it? That doesn't exactly speak to credibility or not credible. You see what I'm saying? We make decisions out of hand without looking into the facts, because we have a preconceived notion of what we believe, and the news that we take in is news that we choose based upon what we already believe. Very few people out there actually look for the truth, is my point. Have I raised my voice even one time? No. When I'm talking about Fox News versus CNN, I've got my opinion, and it's doesn't matter here. But I was never even frustrated or aggravated. I just asked the woman a simple question: why do you believe that? Out of hand, that's what my friends say. Okay, so why do you sit there and make a blanket statement about one news organization and then another one to such polarizing ends without researching it yourself? Well, I don't know. You admit that's what you did? Yeah. Can I ask you a question? Sure. If you were going to send your kids to a school and you had to choose which school they would go to, you just take your friend's recommendation for it? Well, no, of course not. Well, then why do you do that for everything else? Why is it so important to decide where your kids go to school, but nothing else, everything else, you just take somebody else's word for it? How many minutes is it?
18.
Okay. So, why do you just take somebody else's word for it? I mean, isn't everything important? Do you want to live a life where you know where your kids go to school, and you want that to be an important decision, but everything else can just go blow in the wind? Well, I think knowing whether your news source is honest or not is a pretty important decision to make. And I think a lot of news people in America are a bunch of political hacks that have an agenda. Fox News and CNN alike. I research everything. And you know what? People ask the question, how do you know what the news is? It's work. It's work. You got to look into it. You got to find out. Why don't you try checking the background of the guy on CNN or Fox to see how trustworthy they are? What school did that person go to? Who controls what they say? How do you know? Well, just taking somebody else's word for it is not good enough. You see, but we tend to believe whatever we want to hear. And that's all I'm bringing to your attention is why don't you look for the answers yourself? And rather than looking for what you already believe to be true, that's not research. Going to sources that are going to tell you what you already believe is not research. Research is when you go to sources that you don't agree with. I guess it's just of a conservative or a liberal. If a liberal is going to go and consult a source that they don't agree with, they might hear something called the truth. They can accept it or they can reject it. They're probably going to reject it. Conservative can do the same thing. Why can't a conservative go to a liberal or moderate source looking for what that source believes to be true? It isn't going to kill you or cripple you, and you can reject and accept whatever your brain tells you to. Whatever you believe is, whatever seems true to you. Both sides can do it. It isn't going to brainwash you to look a little bit at what the other side thinks. But you know something? When you look at what the other side thinks, you might find something that's true, and it might just get into you. And you might actually start to have a more clear idea of what's going on in the world. No liberal or any conservative is going to be looking into what the other side thinks and get brainwashed by it. If that's the case, then you can't think for yourself anyway. You got to be able to think critically. And when you look at somebody else's point of view, not be afraid to hear it, thinking that you're going to get brainwashed. Because if that's the case, you're not thinking for yourself. You're not exercising critical thinking skills. So, this will conclude part 1 of chapter 1 of Nehemiah. Go ahead, turn it on.